For decades, we've been looking to the stars searching for answers about UFOs. But what if we've been looking in the wrong direction? Today's guest believes the intelligence behind UFOs may have been here all along, and the consciousness may be the force connecting aliens, Sasquatch, psychic abilities, and the afterlife. He's the author of Homegrown Monsters in the Anatomy of Thin Air. And today we're diving into one of the most thought-provoking conversations we've ever had. So buckle up, because this week on Truth Be Told, we're asking one simple question. What if aliens were never from space? I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, author Christopher Noël. Well, we are here with an amazing author. I'm excited to have him here. Not just one book. How many books do you have total?
How many don't I have?
I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch on, I have some from before my paranormal days, which was a novel and a memoir. And then since then, I have had like 10 or 11 on Sasquatch, and then spiritual psychic matters and UAP and aliens and the kind of connective tissue between and among paranormal experiences. And,
wow.
So it's starting to pile up.
So either you're a man that has nothing else to do, or you just really into this stuff.
I'm into it, and I'm sort of semi-retired now.
Oh, nice. Well,
before we started, I told Tony how old I am, but I am not going to share that with the general audience, though.
Well, whatever your skin regimen is, or if it's just genetics, I wouldn't mind having some of that. So
nice of you. Yes.
Well, I want to start with dive right into Homegrown Monsters. I mean, the right off the bat, I said the title is very provocative, and so I'm kind of curious what made you conclude that these beings are Earthborn rather than visitors from another star system, because for years and years and years, we've always talked about outer space
hypothesis.
Yes. So can we just start there? And I'm curious how you come to that conclusion.
It's not a conclusion. It just seems to be the preponderance of logic to me is that a foreign planet would not proceed, the natural history of that planet would not proceed down such almost 100% the same pathways as ours did in order to produce at least insects, reptiles, and humanoids, because those are the main types of aliens that
right.
people report seeing and interacting with. And so then in chapter 1 of that book, which I shall now read in its entirety, oh no, all right, we don't have enough time. So
here, let me get my pillow. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right. I go through a whole bunch of examples of twists and turns in the evolutionary story that led to these three what do you call it? Body plans, forms of life. And they're just outlandishly unlikely. For instance, the first 2.5 billion years on this planet, we just had single-celled organisms. And it took a freak accident of, at a certain point, certain bacteria happened to be consumed by these single cells, and instead of being digested, they stayed alive in there, and it became an endosymbiosis situation. And these, once upon a time, separate entities became part of the single cells, and they are what are now known as mitochondria.
Wow.
And even after, and which give energy to the cell, called the powerhouse of the cell, is mitochondria. Right. And even after that fluky event, it took another 600 million years for multicellular organisms to develop and begin to differentiate on our planet. And then after that, you have a forking tree of possibilities, and any one of which would have given us a completely different landscape of life on our planet. But only certain of them were eventuated, were capitalized upon. And you have environmentally, you have eras in our planet where the whole thing was completely enshrouded in ice. It's called the snowball Earth period. And there's two of them, and they each lasted for multiple millions of years. And it could very well have stayed in that form, and it would just be ice today and no life whatsoever, except it just so happened that we had enough thermal energy in our Earth to give rise to volcanoes, which then spewed enough warmth into the atmosphere to gradually melt this ice. And not only that, but it spewed enough carbon dioxide to allow the still living microbes on the planet that could metabolize carbon dioxide, namely the cyanobacteria. And I'm going to come to the end of this little
it's interesting. It's
spiel in a second. It's just examples of thousands and thousands of little turns in the road that most likely wouldn't have happened. Right. So you have these cyanobacteria, and they can breathe carbon dioxide, and it turns out just by happenstance that they express oxygen. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then over the untold eons, the oxygen level on our planet rose to enough of an extent that oxygen-breathing creatures like mammals and insects and reptiles could begin their slow evolution themselves. You have just enough of an oxygen level, which is 21%, for fire to be tameable.
Right.
It's below 16%, you can't ignite fire. Above, I think it's 28%. One little fire would engulf the entire world because you couldn't put it out, couldn't extinguish it. And so that lucky band of oxygen level that we happen to live in allowed us back in the day, once we evolved, which is a whole nother infinitely complex story, to tame fire, because we have hands and a brain that can tame fire. Good luck. And then we can smelt metal, which is the only way we got toward technology. Without this oxygen level, without our figuring out how to smelt metal, we would never have anything resembling the technology that we have today unless we used rocks.
Right.
And then it was like Project Hail Mary, and it'd be a whole different story. And good luck smelting metal if you're an octopus, or taming fire if you're a colony of ants. It had to be just us. And so anyway, and then one more.
Please.
Mammals. 95% of mammals on our planet are placental mammals. They have a placenta. And the only reason that placentas came to be, it turns out from recent studies, is these viruses. They're called retroviruses. Two of them that happen to come on board our genome along the way. One of them is what is instrumental in producing a hormone called syncytin, which is what allows the body of the placenta to adhere to the wall of the uterus, and the other one's called suppressin, which inhibits the adhesion of the wall, just enough of a balance between these two so that the placenta can do what it needs to do during gestation and then be expelled after birth. If we didn't have either of those, the placenta itself would never have come about, and mammals as we know them, except for a few marsupials and platypuses, mammals wouldn't exist at all.
Right.
So that's the tiniest infinitesimal fraction of the kinds of things that had to happen for our three body plans, insects, reptiles, and humanoids, to come to be. And if the aliens that people describe looked just like reptiles, that would be vanishingly unlikely. And yet it looks like all three of the species that we recognize as being extremely akin to those on our planet. So I think that it's more likely that whatever the root of the alien is, whatever this intelligence is, this agency is that has been visiting us these many millennia, has to be making use of the zoological raw materials in our world in order to form these creatures that are derived from those raw materials. The very fact that people describe being hybridized, like women will be impregnated during an abduction. You may not buy into that. I think it's true from all that I've read and heard over the years. Is in fact, women will be impregnated, and then 2 or 3 months later, the baby will disappear, and they'll then be abducted years later and be introduced to their child. The mere fact that we can hybridize with these aliens means that they have DNA just like our DNA, and that's not going to happen to evolve on another planet.
Right.
So then comes chapter 2. I'm not going to go through chapter and verse, but it just so happens that chapter 2 goes into consciousness, the nature of consciousness, and the formative power of consciousness. I think a lot of the thinking in our little field here is limited because we vastly underestimate the formative power of consciousness. Because not only is consciousness, and I'm presuming that it's separate from the brain for all sorts of reasons, like remote viewing, et cetera, all sorts of things. We could do a whole show on why I think that and why you might think that and others. But it's not only able to contain all information, like a remote viewer who's good at it can attune themselves to a document in North Korea, in a locked room, not by traveling to North Korea, but by somehow, and this is the $1 million question, is somehow attuning to the frequency that information is at within this infinite frequency that is consciousness. So not only is it an informational field, but it can also do things to fit the physical world. It can have an effect. It can do work upon objects. And I think that the fact that gifted human psychics can employ psychokinesis, which is mind over matter. Right. Even though I think mind is a species of matter, so it's not that mind is not matter, but it's called mind over matter. And the fact that we individually can make, say, tables rise up, or 4 of us can make tables rise up, I think you can then extrapolate to a difference in degree, though not a difference in kind, to this alien hive mind of untold numbers of consciousnesses being brought to bear on projects that they can form UAP craft out of minerals in the earth. I think that's why we see them going into volcanoes so often. Is that volcanoes are a ready source of metals, especially iron and magnesium, which are frequently what are found when rarely we get to analyze the debris left by UAPs. Lots of iron and magnesium and other kinds too. But I think that they get these from volcanoes, and then they form them together. Because if there's one consistency in how people describe UAPs, it's that they're not nuts and bolts, as the phrase goes. In fact, they're usually said to be forged in one piece. You've heard that people say that it seems to be one living thing, not pieces put together. And I think that it's a consciousness product, a project of consciousness that they can craft together, and they can also put together creatures built of the sort of cafeteria of genetic material that we have on this planet. And so perhaps it would be time now to play that video that I sent ahead of time, if you want to, if you can.
We can. So we're going to play a video. We have Chris Noël.
But I don't mean to cut off any questions at this point you have.
No. This is great.
I blurted out a whole heck of a lot.
Let's go ahead and play this video, and then we come back. We have a lot more questions. Here we go.
Okay, good.
I really doubt that there is any more authoritative, credible journalistic voice on paranormal phenomena than Leslie Kean, whose UAP books and her profound book, Surviving Death, are go-to sources for accuracy. For years now, she has attended a seance in England in which scientifically impossible events regularly occur.
I mean, there are some kind of forces at play here. When you can sit in a room and watch objects levitate before your eyes, which I've done many times, there's got to be a physics, there's got to be a scientific explanation of what is going on to make that happen. And I wish that more scientists were curious about this. I mean, this is actually happening.
This levitation occurred on the front porch of a house in western New York, at which in June of 2023, I myself witnessed other objects, not tables this time, rising into the air with nobody touching them. More recently, in Germany, this group filmed their psychokinesis experiment under the exacting eye of a PhD computer scientist and one of the very few in academia brave and curious enough to investigate such matters. Yes, he's quite exhilarated here because they were finally able to capture this phenomenon on camera. These folks are working in a long, rich tradition stretching back more than a century and a half, and sometimes captured on film many generations before Photoshop. Philosopher Dr. Stephen Braude is an emeritus professor at the University of Maryland and has been studying such matters for more than 40 years.
I've studied a guy in Argentina named Ariel Farias. Great thing about Ariel is that he doesn't require darkness. He's a regular guy. Again, like the best psychic subjects, he's not interested in being a psychic guru. He's a regular family man. He's got a good day job. He's interested in understanding what's going on. He found, to his surprise, that he's able to make tables rise by touching them lightly at the close end of the table. And we've got some very good video of the table rising under Ariel.
No, porque con las actividades haces incómodo para... No sé, la muñeca... La muñeca... No, cualquier cosa.
Ariel cannot fully levitate the table. People's psychic abilities vary. But his results have been documented in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, a peer-reviewed publication founded back in 1987.
That is fascinating. So can you kind of tell us, for the people that are watching, but the people that did not get to see it, that are on our Apple and iHeart and Spotify, can you explain what we just watched?
Yeah, it was a series of examples that they're very few and far between. When you read into the history of parapsychology and spiritualism and physical mediumship, you begin to almost be bored by the repetitive nature of the phenomena that have been known to occur and documented in writing and in witness statements, and very honorable people have signed off on witnessing these things over the century and a half of objects levitating without, sometimes in the snippets, the clips that were just shown, people are touching the tables, or it's tables in every case, and so this assists the process. But in many cases in the history of this sort of thing, people cannot touch, can just send their consciousness, their intent,
right,
toward the object, and that can change the object such that it becomes lighter than air. But for reasons like, it's hard to duplicate these things in laboratory settings. The Ariel Farias, that last example, he's touching the near side of the table, and it's lifting up under his hands, not fully, but just the near side. And it's been very, very rigorously documented on there's longer videos on YouTube of him, and they have various camera angles at the same time. And it's vouched for by the philosopher I mentioned, Dr. Stephen Braude, who is an emeritus professor. He's not going to be fooled. Like, it's not that this guy's hands have stickum on him or something like that. It's this phenomenon of macro, it's called macro psychokinesis, where you can actually make objects change and especially float against, just to nullify the force of gravity. These are very hard to replicate on command, because the sort of the capacity to do this is often mercurial. It doesn't always come up in the person. Ariel is able to do it on command. That's why he's been written up in this respectable journal. Right. The difficulty with convincing people that this is legitimate is that we're so used to seeing the same type of thing in illusionists' contexts, magic shows, and so there are tricks by which you can make it seem that objects are levitating. So everybody who sees something like this is why I included these authority figures like Leslie Kean. She's not going to be fooled. She's an extremely rigorous thinker, and she has been involved in this physical medium circle in England for many years, and she's seen all sorts of objects fly around the room much more dramatically and heart-stoppingly than what we just saw. But they can't be filmed because it often happens in almost no light or in red light, and it may be that believe this or not, that the spirits involved don't want the stuff filmed because it mitigates or blunts or counteracts or undercuts the vibrations. A lot of people hate the word vibrations and frequency, but in fact, according to Tesla and Einstein and many, many others, all of physical reality is made up of different levels of frequency. Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I think it does come down to that. And my notion of the nature of consciousness, such that these levitations can occur, is that it is at a higher frequency than any of the other levels of reality that we can measure. It's above gamma. On the spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, you go from what's the lowest? Radio waves?
I can look it up.
All the way up to gamma, which is 1 trillion times a quicker cycle per second. Cycles per second, up down per second, than are the radio waves that we use for most of our communication, including the internet. And so gamma can contain 1 trillion times more information than what we normally experience, and I think that consciousness is even at a higher level than that, because it's got to be matter and energy. Matter and energy being two sides of the same coin, as Einstein taught us. So consciousness, in order to affect the physical world, has to be something akin to the physical world. So I'm proposing that it is some kind of matter and energy that can interact with the physical world. And I think that when somebody like whom we saw in these videos imbues an object with a higher proportion of consciousness than it normally has in it, and I think consciousness is ubiquitous, but it spikes the ratio within the table. I think that this higher vibration, this super ultra, still unmeasurably high vibration, increases its occupation of the table. And since the higher you go in frequency in nature, the less dense it is. Therefore, I'm proposing that an object like this, say a table, becomes its net mass becomes lower and lower and lower until its mass becomes less than the air surrounding it. And just like any buoyancy situation, like a balloon, a helium balloon, it rises. I think it's very simple when you get down to it. Nobody's ever been able to measure the force that creates this rise. There's nothing apparently pushing up on these tables for various reasons that I go into in the book. But okay, your turn.
No, it's fascinating. I love your take on this, and I do want to ask one of the boldest ideas, and what we're talking about in your book is
macro psychokinesis.
Macros, yes. So, but the possibility that consciousness can literally create biological beings, I'm really fascinated about that. Can you?
The next big step.
That's a huge step.
I know.
How did you come up with any evidence, or was it a research that you read somewhere? Can you kind of fill us in on that part? Because, like you said, that's a big claim.
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of the, even if I'm right about all this, which is not likely because nobody's likely right, even if I were,
right.
There's still an incalculably greater share of what it doesn't explain than what it does explain. Because how do they micromanage? How do they genetically engineer just with consciousness? I think sometimes they do it the old-fashioned way. We would consider the old-fashioned way with in vitro fertilization. People who are cursed or lucky enough to get on board these ships often see vials or what it is. What's the word for like a big glass, a tube? They'll see embryos in there.
Oh, wow.
I think they sometimes just grow them like we grow babies.
Yeah.
They just need to gather up the genetic material, and I think they mix and match it. How do they do this? It's such a, it's such a micro level. I mean, talk about the opposite of macro psychokinesis. This is micro psychokinesis. But if they can do one, they can probably do the other. And if they put their heads together, so to speak, and they're much more adept and they've been working on this stuff forever, then obviously they do it, I think. If it's true that it's not likely that these creatures come from a foreign planet, then they have to be made somehow, manufactured. A lot of people say that they seem to be mass-produced, especially the Greys. They all look alike. They all act alike. And Whitley Strieber says all the time that they're manufactured. So people, I think the reason that they're not exactly like insects and reptiles and humans is that they fiddle with the genomic material. You're familiar with the Nazca mummies?
Yeah.
Are you on board or off board on that?
Well, I've talked many times with Brian Forrester, and I mean, until I see a little more proof, but I definitely am very interested, and I feel that there's a possibility for sure.
That's pretty much where I am. I've really been kind of fascinated and riveted, and so I've seen a lot of very specific scans. I forget what it's called. It's the next level up above a CAT scan. It's super detailed, where they find reptilian features, bird features in these creatures, and other, and their skulls do seem to be shaped similar to llama skulls. And debunkers say, they're just llama skulls that have been, stuck on top of that neck, and eye holes have been, drilled, or like scooped out and everything. No, well, I think they're using diverse genomes, and somehow they have the know-how, what's the word? Well, the know-how to make it work. And I don't know if they grow these things after they fertilize them somehow. Grow these things, all of them, in a sort of a conventional way, in these tubes in a nutrient bath, or if there's a more magical way that they produce them that to us would be magic, but it's actually just a form of technology using consciousness. But another thing is that people are always trying, scientists and engineers and propulsion specialists are just preoccupied for decade after decade with how these craft fly. How can they defy the laws of physics the way that they do?
Right.
And and they're trying to think about Alcubierre warp drives, and different variations on the warp drive idea, where you bend space and time so that you're not really in the same reality, and therefore you don't have friction either in the air, underwater. You don't have drag, and that's why there's no sonic booms. And I just think that they're barking up the wrong tree with all of that. I think the tree is materialism, is a reductive materialism, where it has to be what we already understand that they're using. I think that there's, again, a vast underestimation of what consciousness can do. And I think that if one person can make a table rise, a hive mind trained upon, in any given area, trained upon a craft can make a gigantic, a massive metal object hurtle through space. I think the sky's the limit. Excuse the pun.
Do you feel like it's more technology versus?
I think without technology, I think that they
I was going to
melded
say through.
Yeah, I think that there's a mind meld between the technology, but it's not engines and such and propulsion. When the Tic Tac went from 80,000 feet to 50 feet in less than a second, the physicist Kevin Knuth says that would have just, if it were operating in anything like the paradigm that we understand for thermodynamics, it would have created enough energy as an exhaust to light up the eastern seaboard, to power the eastern seaboard for a month. It's some absurd figure like that, statistic like that. Yeah. Instead, it created no sonic boom, no heat signature. A lot of these craft are looked at through thermal cameras, and they're cold. Not only are they not hot, they're often cold. And sometimes this gets into a whole bunch of other stuff that we probably don't have time this episode. But I think the low temperature that is created when these things appear is similar to the low temperature that occurs during a spirit visitation, when a manifestation of consciousness briefly into a physical form needs to adopt or to take on energy from the ambient air. And so it takes thermal energy and it takes electronic energy in order to do what it does. And there's a lot that goes into that. But I think that's why there are cold spots in a house. And I think, surprisingly, I think that's related to why there's cold spots when you are in the vicinity of a landing UFO. People talk about that. They talk about they talk also about static electricity. Their hair stands on end, and I think that when the matter and energy that is consciousness increases its presence locally in a place, I think it does a lot of things to thermodynamically and electromagnetically. And I think that's one reason I think that my idea of this is more effective than some other ideas, is that there's actual physical mechanical interaction that is consistently documented in across all domains of the paranormal, including Sasquatch visitations, encounters. People suddenly, the air changes, there's static electricity, people get zapped.
I started believing more about the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, more of some type of an alien or extraterrestrial versus just a living beast. That
I think they're more like more like spirits. I think some of them are flesh and blood, and some of them have died already and are more able to rematerialize, remanifest, because we can do that. Yeah. We can, some of us come to say goodbye to our loved ones after we've died. True. We can only stay around for a few seconds. I think Sasquatch is a whole nother kettle of fish, but Sasquatch is more adept psychically and spiritually than we are. So I think that perhaps 95% of the Sasquatch that people encounter are dead and are visiting. But there are flesh and blood ones, because they eat, they shit, people find blood, people see them with babies. So, they're not only spiritual. Anyway, where the heck were we? This is too much stuff on the table.
I know, too much stuff, but it all makes sense because it all ties in together. One thing that I keep going back to, and I'm going to ask your thoughts on this, going back to Atlantis, very highly functional, high technology, highly advanced beings that were part of this, civilization, continent that, was destroyed, but many think it didn't get destroyed. Many have said it created these underwater cities, and which would make sense to these beings being born here on Earth, and having a higher level of consciousness and the macro psychokinesis, because it sounded like that they were very, psychics and the abilities that they had. What is your thoughts on this? Relates clear back to Atlantis.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because just yesterday I saw Ross Coulthart talking about some of these megalithic stonework examples from the ancient world, and he said one that he visited is called the Unfinished Obelisk in Egypt. It's on the ground. It's like 150 feet long, and it's got a square. It's squared off, right? But they never finished it, and they theorized that it's got cracks in it because it has cracks in it today, and they think, well, they didn't continue it because it wasn't going to be stable once that, if they put it upright. But the point was that he said that if this was done 5,000 years ago, at best we were working with bronze, because iron hadn't been smelted yet. But probably we were working with harder stone than what we were carving on, and there are parts of this obelisk, and this sort of thing is replicated across the board in ancient stonework, is that parts were scooped, as though it had been like liquefied or made malleable. And just as consciousness can change the nature of an object such that it's lighter than air, I think it can also it can soften it. I mean, it would have to be able to change the density of it if, for instance, the consciousness of aliens is able to forge craft out of metal. Right. So I think that they can soften up megalithic objects to work with them, and probably they can levitate them too, which is why everybody's bending themselves into pretzels, the mainstream archaeologists into pretzels, to try to explain the sort of dynamics of how they managed to lift 85-ton pieces of rocks. And so I think the consciousness was much more potent. It had much more prowess back then. And I think we're living in a sort of like a highly diminished form now. And yet some of us, like those we saw in the video, are still have access. Still there's a resurgence of the ancient capacity to do these things. And I think Sasquatch is a people. They're a kindred spirit to us. They're our next of kin on Earth, and I think they have much more of this. But still, the ancients probably had way more than this, and so do the aliens, and perhaps the aliens are the ancients.
Can you talk a little bit before? I know time's going so damn fast, but one of the fascinating parts, because you've mentioned consciousness, and that you believe exists independently of the brain, which I find that fascinating. I know we touched a little bit, but if that's true, how does it completely change our understanding of reality? Because, reality is, what is reality in the first place? It's very matrix to me. It's hard to really understand what reality is, because what I see is and you see are completely two different realities. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not all that taken with that sort of thing in the simulation type of worldview or hypothesis. I just think, broadly speaking, theories of consciousness have broken down into materialism, where consciousness is produced by the circuitry of the brain, and idealism, where consciousness is all there is. Max Planck thought that consciousness is the fundamental reality. Everything else is derived from consciousness. And in order to fit the empirical evidence, I have found it preferable, personally, to take a middle path between those two and say that consciousness is very primal, but it's not the only thing. The physical reality is just as real as consciousness. And then just briefly, in a nutshell, it can be expanded at another time. Ever since the 1970s, physicists who don't agree on a lot have come together on quantum field theory.
Right.
And if you're like me, you get kind of scared off by the Q word, but this isn't quantum in any of that spooky, mind-boggling way. It's just that there are these universal fields that are ubiquitous, and they give rise to the elementary particles that then give rise to the atoms and the molecules that make up the world. So at current count, there are 17 elementary particles. Electrons, photons,
right.
quarks, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go through them because I don't know them. There are 17. And my proposal is that consciousness is yet another of these basic fundamental fields of potential, matter, energy, potential. And it's the 18th one is consciousness. And it interacts with the others. It's the highest frequency, as I was saying, which is why we can't measure it yet. But so we can't have direct evidence of it. But there's tons of indirect evidence. Such as access to information. Why is that indirect evidence? Can't get into it right now. It's too much. Too much. But too much. I tell you, you gotta let me. You can't stop me. But it can resonate. The 18th field. All these 17. Here's the mind-boggling thing. They are ubiquitous, and you might think, ubiquitous. Okay, but when you think about it, there's just as much of this base reality between my two fingers here as there is on Alpha Centauri in the same 3 inches. All 18 of these fundamental fields that are the basis of reality are operating in between these two fingers as they are throughout the universe.
Wow.
Because they each give rise to the constituents of physical reality that may need to come into being at any point. The chair I'm sitting on is just a constellation of different atoms with different made of different particles, and they're all vibrating at different levels, and they come together in a static form temporarily to form a chair. But over the grand scheme of time, it's just as evanescent and fleeting as a soap bubble,
Right.
So I just think my idea is that consciousness is another of these fundamental fields, and it interacts with the known fields that we've already accepted in ways that give rise to these thermodynamic and electrodynamic effects. And I don't know of any other theory, especially if they are only materialistic or only idealistic, where consciousness is everything. I don't know of any other theory that accounts for the dynamism of interaction,
Right.
unless you make consciousness part on the same spectrum and able to physically interact with the other parts of the spectrum.
What is a nested field?
Clear enough. Because consciousness is the highest frequency, it's picture the wavelengths, picture an atom,
Right.
and so the nucleus of an atom is a certain size. The wavelength of the consciousness field is even smaller than the nucleus of an atom. So in other words, this field permeates everything at a level that's smaller than the nucleus of an atom, which is why we can't measure it. And so it's nested within reality instead of being somehow, we used to thinking of consciousness or, as being in some sort of transcendent beyond. But I think it's inherent in everything, which is why it has access to all reality, which is why we can remotely view all reality. Right. It's in everything. There's one more thing I wanted to add to that. Nested. This author Nigel Kerner, who wrote some very interesting books about proposing what the alien agenda is. He had this line that is, when we die, we go to the place between atoms. and that's sort of a banner I use. And there's then examples in the book where this inside out action, where the level of the consciousness field that is at a default sort of low level most of the time can upsurge, like in those tables that rose. And there's an inside out effect that happens. Dean Radin was finally able to bend a spoon, and he talks about this, and I quote him in the book, and he chose to bend the bowl of the spoon instead of the neck, because the neck is too thin and you can explain it away more easily. Yeah. So the bowl was thick, no way to bend it. But he said it was just like people say, it just turned to putty. He showed the spoon on this interview. It just turned to putty, and it just bent over, and then it instantly hardened up again. And he said he didn't think he was imposing anything from the outside. He thought that he was changing the information structure from the inside out. And this too is sort of a rallying cry in my mind for how I think consciousness works, from nested within everything, and then it can change. It can directed by intention, because our consciousness is the same thing as this consciousness. We are one. So directed by our intention, it can change the other aspects of the physical world. Right. Anyway, that's pretty awesome. I tried to vomit out a lot of
that. No, that's great. And unfortunately, our time is pretty much wrapping up. So this is definitely going to be a part 1. So hopefully you'll come back up for a part 2. But
you didn't say don't call me, I'll call you.
Yes, right. No, this is a lot of great stuff. So
we can slow down next time a little bit more.
Hey, we'll however long it takes. I just enjoy the conversation of something new and something I haven't heard for a while. So I've heard this before on certain levels, but you've definitely done your research. But speaking of that, after all your research, what is one conclusion you've reached that you believe humanity simply is not ready for, but we're all going to have to face it?
This is controversial, but I think that Jesus came down to prove to us through his example, not that you had to believe in him or you were going to go to hell. I think that's a distortion. I think he was proving to us that there is no death. I think that that's his main message, and
which is amazing.
His resurrection and coming back to hang out with people afterwards.
Right.
In the flesh, it shows that flesh and the spirit are continuous with each other. The spirit / consciousness occupies all matter, including, like he said, put your hand in my wound, touch my feet. It's actually the flesh and blood. I'm not some wispy spirit. Right. It's all part of one thing. And I think this oneness was his message. And that would be the message I think it's most difficult for people. The mainstream consciousness is so deeply entrenched in materialism, the small m materialism, whereas I'm trying to talk about the capital M materialism that includes the matter and energy that is consciousness. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a long evolution coming.
Yeah, I believe, because I believe that fear was added for power.
Yeah, definitely keep us down, keep them.
Yeah, keep the people
and I think
down.
that the revelations that are unfolding in terms of UAP alien disclosure are so difficult to digest.
Yeah,
because they come part and parcel with a reframing of our concept of reality, which is consciousness.
Yeah.
Which is much more driven and colored and suffused by consciousness than we have come to understand so far. And I think it's a big pill to swallow. Big pill,
but as my grandma used to put bacon grease on it, so let's
slide right down. Slide right down. And I think my books are trying to be that bacon grease.
Yeah, so. Good. That's your tag.
My tag.
Chris Noël. I bring the bacon grease. All right. So, we said we're going to do a part 2, which we will, maybe even a part 3, because, you have a lot of books. But in 5 years, what do you think with all this new technology and release of files and Steven Spielberg's, disclosure. In 5 years, what do you think will happen that will make people look back at this conversation and say Chris was right or was on the right track?
Well, have you heard of the telepathy tapes?
I have.
That podcast was extremely exciting, but not as exciting as what's coming up next, which is a documentary in which the pretty loose parameters that they used for these telepathy trials on the podcast are transplanted into laboratories at the University of Chicago and the University of Virginia. And they have triple blind, absolutely bulletproof tests that prove what was claimed in the telepathy tapes. Right. That documentary is coming out at the end of this year or January. And I think that that's going to bring a lot of people across to having to accept the independence of consciousness from the brain. And so there's that. And there is, there's something else too. So 5 years from now, I think that it depends on how much truth we can pull out of the cold dead hands of the legacy program, the control group that has kept the nature of our visitors or our fellow earthlings from us. If the long promised peer-reviewed DNA results from the Nazca mummies come through and finally convince people, not the cynics, but people who are rational, convince them that these were creatures that were created, hybridized, 1,500 to 7,000 years ago in Peru. And then other people bring forward similar creatures from other parts of the world. That will move the needle too. It's going to have to be a multi-pronged effort of progress, and it may not have gotten that much farther in 5 years. There's also a DNA study coming out about Sasquatch that's being run by the University of North Carolina.
Oh, that's
that is
cool.
Supposed to, it's very high test situation, but it's being done very slowly and very carefully. But they have found very anomalous. They've seen so far preliminarily very anomalous results. And so that's why they have to be all that much more careful to nail everything down, because they know what the blowback is going to be. So that too will be helpful. And another 10 avenues I'm not even thinking of right now that need to coalesce as we move forward. And it may be 20 years.
Wow.
And at which, go ahead.
No, I just, I love that. I really hope that, we finally get some information that many of us have been studying or talking about for many years.
So many years. Yeah.
Because I think, I've talked to many people like Eric Van Daniken and all these are legends in our genre that said we hope that we get to see what we've been talking about in their lifetimes. Unfortunately, our legends are leaving us, and it would be nice that the next generation, who is us, will be able to see their work and see it come true and be disclosed. So
there's so many Sasquatch researchers who died without ever seeing one. They just found many tracks and talked to 1,000 witnesses, and then never got to have fruition to that.
So, well, Chris, how do people find you? I couldn't find your Instagram or anything, so
I don't have any of that kind of falderall. But because I'm back in my day, we only had YouTube.
Back in my day,
Seth Meyers. My YouTube channel is Impossible Visits, and my website, really a web page, is thenearnessofyou.net.
Thenearnessofyou.net.
Yeah, and you can see my email is on there, so write me if you have any desire to, any questions. I'd like to I like it when people reach out. And my new book is called The Anatomy of Thin Air, that goes into this whole consciousness theory.
Well, we're going to put all the links in our description and bios, and this is just a part one, everybody. So if you enjoyed this one, don't worry, we'll have Chris back. We appreciate his work and his books and the effort he puts in to keep us interested, keep us informed. So we appreciate you, Chris.
And I kept the real bombshells for next time. So
come on now.
You see that you tune in next time, folks.
That's it. That's his nickname, Chris Cliffhanger.
The grease.
No. Oh yeah, bring the grease. All right. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you on Truth Be Told. Every Friday we have the most amazing guest that brings us their research and their years of work, and we hope that you enjoy this. So please subscribe, follow, share the show, leave comments, and until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye.